Welcome back to another episode of the Working Audio Tools podcast, the podcast where we discuss all things mixing. And this week we are getting back to another mix comparison. We may have labelled this a mix battle, kind of is a battle, but we're going to be comparing, constructively critiquing each other's mixes. For those of you watching and listening on YouTube, there is now a playlist with all of the mix comparisons in, so you can go back and listen to all of those. Witness our journey to developing as mix engineers, and please feel free to comment on those videos as well. Let us know if you agree or disagree with our thoughts and opinions. This week we have a track from Todd Kessler, and it's been originally mixed by Marc Daniel Nelson, who's a wonderful mix engineer, and we've had a few of his songs on the podcast already. They've always been impeccably well recorded, and this song is no exception. It's a beautiful song, and Paul pointed out to me just how romantic the lyrics were this week.
Yeah,
and,
love the lyrics.
I didn't see Paul as a romantic personally. I've been accused of not being romantic myself. So
deep down.
This is new and unfamiliar territory for both of us.
I understand all your fears.
Before we get into the mix, though, we do need to talk about our sponsors for this episode, which is Baby Audio, the maker of creative instruments and effects for music production. Baby Audio plugins are all about solving problems and adding character to your mix, from Humanoid, the over-the-top pitch corrector, the radical voice manipulator creating stunningly robotic vocals from any singing performance, through to Tape, the AI-powered tape saturator plugin. Go to babyaudio.io to learn more and get 15% off any order with code WAT15 at checkout. So, Paul, having just listened to both mixes, again, it's safe to say we've taken very different approaches. Your approach this week, if I believe, was to kind of try and copy Marc Daniel Nelson's approach.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, yeah. So my approach was slightly different. I think you were seeing this as kind of a client rough mix and you were wanting to get close to that sound. I didn't approach it from that point of view. I listened to it and I thought I'll honour certain bits, but I found a couple of things about it that I didn't necessarily like that I would have thought would have maybe been enhanced slightly differently at the mastering stage. For example, it's a very warm mix. There's a lot of low mids going on. And initially I felt it was a little bit overbearing. That was kind of my main concern. But how did you get on with this track?
It was one of those mixes where it was so well recorded that I genuinely didn't have to do much to it. And it was a good learning experience because I had Marc's mix as basically like the rough. But the issue is it's not a rough, it's a finished final mix. But it was interesting for me to kind of try and almost reverse engineer some of the things that Marc was doing. And then, like you did, kind of listen to certain elements and go, right, I'd maybe change that. But it's very, very subtle moves. And there was a lot of me on this, like going past the solo button, solo off, solo off, solo on, solo off, and just going back and forwards with Marc's mix. Because like, at the end of the day, when it comes to like mixes for your portfolio, if I could get a mix that sounds very close to a Marc Daniel Nelson mix, then pretty damn good for the portfolio. So yeah, I just used him as a guideline and then kind of treated it as if, the client came to me and went, right, this is, what I've got just now. Could you kind of get that to where it is and see if you can improve on it? And I've just done the best that I can, really. Again, it's difficult because it's Marc Daniel Nelson, but there was the little things that had changed. But I'm talking, when I use my critical listening ears, I was on about like talking like panning there. I was making sure that everything was in the exact place that Marc put it, because I was treating it as if it was the client rough. And it's I think it's a good thing to start experimenting with now, because at the end of the day, when a client gives you a rough, they're expecting you to give them like all the decisions that they made back to them.
All right, well, for the listener's reference, let's just play the intro of the Marc Daniel Nelson mix so they can hear what we were referring to.
Jagged metronome of typewriter keys. A simple thought brings you to me, and I'm thankful every Read a text, no time to call. To slow down, oh, I pray. I'm so glad I found you the old-fashioned way. I'll write to you with ink from a pen. Feel the weight as the words sink in. My mind moves too fast for my hand. I need to tell you this while I still can.
So as you can hear there, it's a very warm, full, dense sounding mix in the low end. For me, the overall EQ is slightly odd. I would definitely be tweaking a bit of the overall EQ there in mastering. Let us know your thoughts below. Paul, whose mixes do you want to listen to first?
Yours first. Seeing as you've kind of done an old Paul Third and went gung-ho and went, yeah, I'm going to do it the headphone way. So let's hear what you've done.
All right, this is my mix of The Old-Fashioned Way by Todd Kessler.
Jagged metronome of typewriter keys. A simple thought brings you to me, and I'm thankful every day. I'm so glad I found you the old-fashioned way. In a time when we want it all, everything's so fast. Read a text, no time to call. To slow down, oh, I pray. I'm so glad I found you the old-fashioned way. I'll write to you with ink from a pen. Feel the weight as the words sink in. My mind moves too fast for my hand. I need to tell you this while I still can. It was so dark that a warm summer night. I much prefer it to the bright blue light. And I feel the need to say, I'm so glad I found you the old-fashioned way. I'll write to you with ink from a pen. Feel the weight as the words sink in. My mind moves too fast for my hand. I need to tell you this while I still can. Jagged metronome of typewriter keys. Another page done, my soul at ease. and I'm thankful every day. I'm so glad I found you the old-fashioned way. I'm so glad I found you the old-fashioned way. I'm so glad I found you the old-fashioned way.
So, Paul, we've not done a mixed critique in a while. I'm not going to lie. I'm nervous, and I've not heard this in a while, and I already know the obvious thing that is going to stand out for you.
Right, okay. So, I've made notes.
Oh, dear.
The dreaded notes. Okay. The piano for me is way too loud. Like, not excruciatingly loud, but it's like there's certain elements of the mix. So when you stick close to Marc's mix, you can hear what he was going for. And in Marc's mix, the piano was a supporting element just to enhance the bass a little bit in certain parts, especially kind of the chorus bits. It's just to kind of fill out the bass a little bit. Where in your mix, I just kind of feel like the piano is very loud and it takes precedence over the mix when it's playing. But again, it could be a thing that because obviously I've had it so far back, but it's kind of meant to be felt, not heard. Obviously, hearing it in the mix is like a bit strange.
Okay, so we've prioritized different instruments in the mix, and this is where I've gone differently to what Daniel did, and you've followed what he's done. Okay.
Yeah. So I've stuck basically to the exact level that Marc had it in the mix. The bass is too loud for me, and because the thing is, especially when the piano and the bass come together, it creates this big boom, 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 and what Marc did, and what I noticed was when I was doing the pre-mixing, Marc did a lot of work in trying to manage the two of them playing together, and I could hear that he was trying to add a bit of depth to that low end, which is something that I had to work at as well. So yours is full, it's big, you can definitely hear it, you can feel it, but I would say that it kind of is a bit too much, in my opinion. I think the low end is just a bit too much, and it kind of gets in the way of the mix and the instrumentation a little bit. But then tell me about like the pianos and the low end, because you do have the Amphions now, and again you've got your setup still with this the one sub with the PSIs. Now there's one thing I noticed with the piano that I'm going to take a guess that it's the sound of the piano that I'm hearing, because there's these noises that come through and I find them quite distracting, and I was like, where are these coming from? And I was like, is this a sound design thing that Ed's doing, that have I done a Paul Third, or I've missed something that was that was meant to be in it?
No,
what was that?
I know exactly what you mean, and you're referring to chair squeaks and hammer tones and pedal noises from him moving the pedal. Now, they've come out because I think may have overcompressed the piano, and that's sucked them out a little bit more. But I went through it and I thought, because there's really annoying creaks where he moves on a creaky chair, like halfway through holding on a chord, and I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to cut that out because it's so much of the sound, and I'm not going to cut that piano part short. And also I just thought, well, it's part of the ambience in the room, and it's such an intimate track. I thought, okay, I could process those out, but I could embrace those and use them to create the intimacy of the song, to make you feel like you're in a room with the piano and the musicians. So, yeah, I know what you mean. They are prominent, and I may have pulled them out too much with compression, but for me, I didn't feel like it was the right decision to edit or RX those things out. I don't even know if RX would have done it because they're such loud parts.
I think where I'm surprised is that you've made a decision that I think doesn't fit what the artist would have wanted. Now, but again, it's because I keep on referencing back to Marc's mix, because obviously Marc's mix is the artist's vision. So I think maybe where it's
I wasn't following that.
Right, okay.
I was doing a Ed Thorne mix.
Right, okay. So it's hard for me now because obviously you've went for your own priority in the how you heard the mix, so you heard the piano to be quite prominent. Where I think obviously in the actual mix and for the artist wanted it to be more of a supporting thing. So that's a creative decision. I would say that due to that kind of low end and the pianos being quite loud, I would say that the guitar sits back a little bit too much for me. The guitar was something that was really, really difficult for me because it had a lot of noise in it, a lot of hiss. And I was like when I tried that RX and it wasn't working and stuff, and Marc had it sit in a very set way where it was wide, but it was there at a depth. So I'd say that the guitars were just a little bit too quiet. The acoustics, I would say, were just a little bit on the bright side, and they were maybe clashing with the vocal a little bit. I've done that in the past as well, where I've had certain elements and like the high upper mid range or the top end is maybe clashing with the upper mid range of the vocal. So I think there's a little bit of clashing on there. Overall, I feel that it's quite a forward mix. The vocals are nice. The vocal, I think you've went for a very forward vocal sound, and it's definitely got a lot of girth to you. Like it genuinely comes out the speakers, comes out in headphones. Maybe a tiny bit on the loud side, but I think what you've done well is you've had the detail. There's a lot of detail in the vocal, and because this song is very much like he's telling a story. That's how I've seen it. You've allowed the vocal to have that a lot of detail, a lot of clarity, and it definitely jumps out the mix. For me, I just kind of feel that elements are a bit too separate. I feel like the low end is a little bit too loud. Piano is definitely, for me, way too loud. The vocal's quite loud. And then I think certain elements have to kind of take a back seat because of the priority of certain things. But obviously when I've stuck to Marc's mix, I can hear that the way that he's mixed it is that he's gave everything a balance. Where the low end's got to be, the low end's got a very subtle balance to it, where it was hard for me mixing it because every time I was like, I want to give it a little bit more low end. I want to give it a little bit more low end. But then when I referenced my mix and then your mix, I was like, no, okay, I can actually hear the low end is just right, and it's just all about balance. So I would say that personally, what I would do is I would take that piano right down and have it in the way that it is in the final release. And I think what you will find is that the bass will be a little bit more controlled. You won't have those noises coming in, and the guitars will be allowed to kind of have that a little bit of space. I don't know if because the low end and the pianos are quite loud and the acoustic guitars are quite bright, that's why you've had to make the vocal quite forward as it is. So I would say that it's quite a separate mix. Like I could hear certain elements. Like if I want to hear the low end, there's the low end, vocal, piano, again acoustics. So you've got separation there. I just don't know if it's a little bit a bit too disjointed, like vocals there, bass is down there.
Yeah, okay. Just for the listeners, we actually didn't discuss which direction we were going to go towards until we'd kind of gone our separate ways, and Paul said, right, I've honoured Marc's as a rough mix, and I said, oh right, well I've done the opposite this time. Whereas in the past I've honoured the rough mix and Paul's done his own thing.
Typical.
I mean, my objective for this was to create an intimate mix. So I did obviously choose the piano as the lead instrument there. So I will try your suggestions and see if swapping those priorities round affects the mix positively. But yeah, the ultimate goal was intimacy, but I have definitely pushed things a little on the loud side. I think listening back, a week, probably 10 days later now. So yeah, I would maybe back off some of that. I tried to get the depth and the space with the lead guitars, and I did try and place the acoustics a little bit further back. Definitely the lead with some reverbs and stuff, giving it some depth. So yeah, I'll try your suggestions.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wide mix. I think you've got a really nice wide mix, and I do think that your vocal treatment was really nice, and I think with a vocal, you definitely got that intimacy. Like, I think it told the story really, really well. I think if the low end, if the piano was brought down, and then the low end was brought down a little bit, and just kind of sculpted in a way where it had just sat back and had a little bit more depth, I think that it would have just allow everything to come in, because I think what I could hear is that because everything's kind of like out and like kind of got its own space in the mix, it just means that for other elements to sit in, you've got to kind of make them loud. So even when I heard the synthy part, there's like the wee plinky bit, the Rhodes, like dum 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 dum. Again, it's like, I think just like because of how prominent certain things are, it meant that I think you needed to push volume a little bit. But it's definitely got its own character. I mean, it's definitely got, as you said, an intimate feel. It's definitely got solidity to it. It's definitely got weight. But again, it's always going to be difficult for me because of I've stuck to like the artist's mix. So obviously it's always going to be difficult for me, and certain things are going to stand out like a sore thumb. Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's an activity I should do, is to try and do another version and reverse engineer what Marc did, because if you can reverse engineer the greats, that's how you're going to train your ears and get good.
Honestly, yeah.
Certainly with mastering, I've been reverse engineering all sorts of masters that I've done in the past, masters of my own tracks, masters of some of the tracks we've done on the channel, on the podcast that Marcel's done. So yeah, there's been a few different mastering engineers I've tried to reverse engineer, and it's really effing hard, but you really have to tune your ears in. So yeah, it's good training, I think. All right, well, on that bombshell, let's listen to Paul's mix and discuss that.
Jagged metronome of typewriter keys. A simple thought brings you to me, and I'm thankful every day. I'm so glad I found you the old-fashioned way. In a time when we want it all, everything so fast. Write a text, no time to call. To slow down, oh, I pray. I'm so glad I found you the old-fashioned way. I'll write to you with ink from a pen. Feel the weight as the words sink in. My mind moves too fast for my head. jagged metronome of typewriter keys. Another page done, my soul at ease, and I'm thankful every day. I'm so glad I found you the old-fashioned way. I'm so glad I found you the old-fashioned way. I'm so glad I found you the old-fashioned way.
If you don't have an in-house mastering engineer like we're fortunate enough to have with Marcel at Actu Make with the Working Audio Tools, DistroKid have you covered. For just $99 a year, you can buy unlimited mastering for all of your tracks in tandem with unlimited releases via DistroKid. Mixair from DistroKid uses AI technology to measure the EQ and the dynamics of your track and then present you with numerous options to tweak and customize your master. You can flip between the original and the generic mastered option.
Blame it on the whiskey, blame it on the bad weed.
So instantly we can hear that's making the track louder, and it's also slightly flattening the EQ, bringing in a little bit more of the mid-range and of course the top end. We can adjust the intensity, which is how much compression and limiting is being applied to the track.
Blame it on the only thing you've ever seen. Run and tell your mother. Blame it on your brother.
I think somewhere in the middle works for this track. And the EQ options are self-explanatory. We can make the track effectively duller or brighter.
Just ain't right. All you do is lie. All you do is try to deny. All you do is lie. Even when you know it just ain't right. All you do is lie.
Download your mastered track and release it as easily as you do all of your other unlimited uploads. Get 30% off your DistroKid subscription using the Working Audio Tools VIP link below. Right, that was Paul's mix of The Old-Fashioned Way by Todd Kessler. Now, immediately you'll be able to hear that Paul has honoured the rough mix very well. And he's definitely gone for a quieter, more gentle overall approach. I think the first thing that stood out was you didn't quite go for the full, dense, low mids that Mark Daniel Nelson's gone for, which, as I said earlier, I think is a little overbearing. The danger with that was, and I think this is possibly why Mark did that, and also why I went for such a low-end forward mix, is because it can sound quite thin. And I did wonder if, again, this is probably in contrast to my denser low-end mix, but if the whole thing does sound slightly on the anemic side, although that's quite a harsh word to use.
Yeah, I think due to the contrast of your mix, you're automatically going to probably see it as, you know, as a thin mix. You know what I mean? And again, because I listen to yours and I'm like, oh, that's a bit too much. So again, it's a natural thing when obviously like one's mixed at one way and one's mixed at another. Yeah. That perception's always going to be
there's a bit of a psychoacoustic there, and as always, if we meet in the middle, we'd probably have the right balance. Other than that, a very sweet vocal sound, as always, and you enhance the texture of the recording, which sounds like some kind of 1176 texture, kind of grit, almost like a slight saturation. Did you add any saturation to the lead vocal?
It was the exact same process that I've done before. However, I've changed ceilings of sound now, where before I was always doing it to a certain slope, where now what I do is I find the natural slope of the vocal and then I balance that. So then that way it's not really like massively shaping something to fit. Like before I was trying to get vocals to fit a certain slope, where now I just find the natural slope and then I balance it to that slope. The top end gets matched to what I always match it to.
Yeah, because
So-
if you try matching the vocal in Ceilings of Sound to just the pink noise curve, you get some raging top end going on. So are you still doing kind of pink noise to about 1K, brown noise to about 5, and then, minus 4.5 to about 5K, and then brown noise?
I've changed it now. So now I find the natural noise slope of the vocal. So like I'll get it up in Ceilings of Sound and you'll see like the noise slope, and then I'll just go through the noise slopes until I get the one that matches closest with the natural vocal, just a vocal on its own. And then so what I do is then that's my slope. So then I balance everything from the fundamental to 1.5K. There, I'll do brown to like whatever sibilance or whatever, like 3 to 5K peak there is. And then I will use Emra's vocal shaper. I'll use air in that. And then I'll get that, the top end to minus 4.5 dB slope. I tried pink on this, but I always find when you got a pink in the top end, it's just too bright. It's just too bright. But when I did it to minus 4.5 in the top end, it worked really, really well. And, you know, it's just that process that I use all the time, and I always get consistent results. Yep. And then when I was A-Bing with Marc's, it was very close to his. It was just, I just thought it was a little bit more refined.
And if I'm not mistaken, you've got a video on your Patreon page describing this process, or was that your old process and you're going to do an update?
No, I updated it, but it's not a video. It's just basically like a long post on my Patreon for Patreon members about like the whole detail of it and like how you could use it to do it on vocals and use it on other sources as well. I've refined it, so it works way better now. Because when I tried to do it first and done it to the minus 4.5 dB slope, the vocal just sounded unnatural because it wasn't the tonal characteristic of the vocal. But matching it to its natural slope worked way better. Got the top end where I needed it, and
I think I can't remember if this was the mix I moved away from Ceilings of Sound on. Actually, I'm using it as a reference and a comparison. Like, okay, what could it sound like according to these slopes, and then make a decision whether or not to embrace that or the characters of the vocal. I can't remember what I did on this one. I mean, overall, it's a very well balanced and controlled mix. There's a nice depth and a nice space to it. Like I said, it was not as warm or as dense in the low mids as Marc's, which is over the top anyway.
I've got 2 verbs on the snare because obviously I don't know what Marc did, so I don't know like what, because I could hear that there was like a verb on the snare. It sounded like it to me. So I had a snare plate and I had a short snare verb, and I was just trying to dial them in to taste a little bit. And at first I had it a little bit too loud, brought it back, and then I was trying to listen to Marc's, and it was quite difficult because there was times with a snare where I was like, mine's a little bit too toppy, so I rolled off a little bit high end. Then it's too loud, so I took the clipper off, and then it's like, it sounds a bit too punchy, because Marc's snare has this thing where it's not really a punchy snare. It's like, so it's like a not a it's a very
it's kind of
softish,
authoritative but delicate at the same time.
Yes, that's probably the best way to describe it in my opinion. Definitely the best way to describe it. So again, it was difficult, and I'm trying to get that level right and trying. I think I compressed it to begin with, and I ended up taking all the compression and slight bit of clipping off just because it was affecting. I was almost making the snare too punchy, and again, less is more. I just ended up really not doing much to it, and then it was all about just trying to get the high pass filter right, just so I had enough like low end in the snare without the snare sounding too anemic. So the 2 mixes still sound slightly different, but if you were to A-B them, you'd be like, wow, this is like very, very, very similar.
Well, we've had people strip the audio from these podcasts, download them, and then A-B them and give us extensive feedback, which is fascinating. If you can be bothered doing that, please do. The backing vocals sound lush. I like those, and they really nicely reinforce the vocals in the chorus. So, I guess my final comment would be that the vocals and the chorus seem like the right balance because the leads are forward a bit, aren't they? Versus the verse where I just felt they sounded a bit distant. So, but I did listen on the PSIs, the Amphions, and some headphones. And again, I would say fractionally, I think your mix translates better to headphones than the speakers.
I did a lot of the mix, most of the mix on speakers actually. So seeing the pre-mixing, I was already in the Atmos room. So I did all the pre-mixing in the Atmos room, and then I took it in here, Then I got in the Hyphemins, so I got the Ananda Nanos in, and then I got the HEs in, and then I went to the edifiers, and I did the last hour of the mix on the edifiers, so it was finished on the edifiers. So all in, it's had actually more on the speakers. And what I like about the edifiers is that you don't need to sub with them. But as you can see, I'm in a different position in this room now. The desk has been completely generally put in the corner because that's the where it measures best. I got Room EQ Wizard. What a fuck! Should have never done that. Jesus, I spent so much of my life doing fucking little tiny adjustments, but I've got the room. Honestly, I've got the room sounding as good as it's ever going to get, and the low end's right. And what I liked with the edifiers was I was able to judge the low end depth quite well. So when I was listening to yours, I was like, okay, I could see, how forward it is compared to, say, mine, which has purposely been, what did I do? Yeah, I think I used stage 1 on the bass. So I used the depth function.
Oh,
so
you've actually put it back in the mix.
Yeah, so
right.
I've manipulated early reflections, and I've also, I think I used the mono spread to 100%. I just widened it. I just got it like out and made it wide. On the edifiers, what I hear is it just does that. Because that's what I was hearing in Marc's, was that the bass sometimes to me felt like it's too low. But then it was interesting when I listened to yours and then listened to mine right after it. And then it was like, no, I actually do feel like the bass is actually sitting right in context to the rest of the track. And I kind of feel like it's just, what I learned from Marc was what I had to do in this mix was to get everything to sit together. So it's this kind of landscape of the acoustics are kind of the most prominent instrument most of the time. Piano's just a supporting thing. The guitars, what I could hear was more about depth. Guitars were to sit in a depth, kind of a 3D thing going on, and the vocals were just about sitting in the middle, but again, sitting in that landscape and just everything feeling like it's kind of in this kind of one place where it's almost like what I heard in Marc's mix was that it wasn't really a separated mix. It was a very cohesive mix, and that was the way that he had it. So that's the way that I had to mix it. But the low end was difficult. Like I had to play with the low end to get it right to the way I wanted to get it. But having the Ananda Nanos, obviously the low end is amazingly detailed in that, but having the edifiers in the room, the two of them together really helped me to get that bass sit right, in my opinion. But I learned a lot from this mix, a lot of things that I picked up myself, which is great because it's not watching a YouTube video, you know what I mean? Somebody going, yeah, do this, do that, I did this on this mix, I did it on that mix. You try to do it on a mix and it's not the same mix and it doesn't work. So trying to find the solutions to the problems I was having to get the mix to sound the way that kind of he had it was a really good learning experience. And I'm listening back to it thinking, and I'm like really happy with the mix. I'm happy with the speaker translation in the room, and I'm happy with it on headphones. And yeah, I do advise people to do that. If you produce like a Pro Multitracks, if they have a finished mix, even if it's Warren's mix, try and stay close to what they've done and then try and better it if you can. Yeah, you'll find it's a very, very, very good learning experience. You'll learn more from that, just going for it and just being like, yeah, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, and this is my take on the mix. I think it works better for clients. I think it gets you more in a mindset of working for clients, because I've had it in the past where a client gave me a mix and I've not really paid that much attention to the rough. I've listened to it a little bit and I've kind of given it what I thought I needed, and then they've been really pissed off and they're like, yeah, like you're going to need to redo this again because that's not what I fucking gave you. I gave it to you to make it 5-10% better. You know what I mean? And that's what I tried to do here. Yeah, it's an interesting one, but I do like that we have different takes. I do like the fact that you've given a different perspective on the mix, and again, you've brought certain things out that I would have never heard before, because obviously I never had the piano as loud as that, so I didn't actually know that all these squeaks and blah 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 were there.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess what we should have done is agreed to either do our own versions or to both try and honour the mix and see who could get closer. Maybe that's an activity for the next one, whichever one that is.
But do you think we should just do that all the time now? Do you think that we should probably just think about like getting a rough out of everything that we do? So that way we don't have this kind of subjectivity where we're like, yeah, I could do this to your mix. Because in reality, if we want to get, full-time work and we want to get industry mixes or whatever, they don't want you to be a producer, and that's the producer's job. They're like, right, that's the aim, that's the vision, make that vision 5 to 10% better. Do you think that that's something that we should just be thinking about doing all the time? Scrap all the subjectiveness, that scrap what we want to hear, and just think about almost, it's boring, but thinking the way mixers do. Because obviously when we've had all these mixers on the podcast, they're always like, the rough, man, the rough is, stay true to the rough. It's so important. Even Jason Joshua was talking about it, it's just like, and again, when we're with MSM, like respect the rough, and your job is just genuinely to take their vision and make it as good as you can.
Yeah, you're probably right. Honor it as much as we can, and with these mixed comparisons moving forward, maybe that should be the aim. And maybe, in fairness, that should have been the aim for this track because it was such a wonderful mix. Not all of the rough mixes that we've had have been a lot of the time we've not even had them, to be fair.
Yeah, very true.
And not all of them have really been up to scratch. So it has been a case of, well, let's just do our own thing and see where it goes. But that, I'd say equally that, one is part of the experimental process. Where can we go with this? But equally as experimental is trying to replicate a rough mix because you have no idea what Marc Daniel Nelson did to execute that mix. And there's 1,000 different ways of achieving the same result. So I'd say there's merit in either approach. But I think, I've had it this week with a client. He gave me a rough mix that was bone dry. And I just thought, okay, it's a ballad. This needs space and airiness and depth. So I added some of that in. And then he'd also panned the guitar one side and it just clashed with the hi-hats. So I'd said, look, I'm just going to move this to the other side. But other than that, pretty much got his panning scheme in mind, which was what he wanted. So yeah, you're right. It is valuable to be doing that. And it is a good exercise, I suppose.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's all learning experiences. But one thing I want to ask you is how you've been getting on with the Amphions and also the PSIs with the sub. Now you've got that kind of sorted. How has that kind of impacted your mixing? Have you, especially adding in a second monitor, because obviously the two of them do two very different things. They have two very different sounds. So like, how has that been for you?
So the Amphions and PSIs do quite different things. The PSIs are connected to what is now a mono subwoofer. There were two. But I went down a rabbit hole of translation and room acoustics, and basically in my room, stereo subwoofers was causing problems which nobody can explain to me. I think I briefly mentioned it in a previous episode. It was doing something, I suspect some kind of phase cancelling in the low mids. When I engaged the subs, something in the low mids would drop by about 1.5 dB, and the PSIs are upper mid-range forward as it is, so it just became more of a contrast. Having the mono sub and a slightly different setting on Trinov has fixed that, but it wasn't the slightly different setting with the stereo subs that was causing the problem. So I feel like I need to mix the low end on the PSIs first and then move to the Amphions, because the Amphions just seem to offer this translation where they highlight if there's low end issues. For example, I had a drill track with a guy and there was this 808 going at about 30 hertz. It was absolutely raging. Now my PSI system could handle it. So I was hearing it was a bit overwhelming, but I didn't quite hear how overwhelming. So then when I moved to the Amphions and you can see the cones, I did a slow-mo on my Instagram.
I've seen that.
And they're just going, and it was like, fucking hell, I'm going to blow these speakers here. Because even though it was lower than the Amphions can reproduce, they were still trying to put out that low end. So I ended up multi-band compressing that to catch that note when it was coming out, which ended up working really well and translating. I was aware of it on the PSIs, but I wasn't aware to the extent at which it wouldn't translate until I put it on the PSIs. Sorry, on the Amphions. The Amphions have a very cohesive mid-range. They're not as forward as an ATC or a Mum 8 speaker in the mid-range, but they have a nice cohesiveness, and it's just a slightly different cohesiveness to the PSIs, which, like I said, have a slightly upper mid-range forward. But the airiness and the detail in the top end on the PSIs is just unrivaled by anything I've heard. And because the Amphions, the crossover, I think, is at 16 or 1800 hertz. The tweet is actually covering a huge range, so they don't extend as high. But It's just useful having a second set of speakers for sure. I'm still referencing on the Anchor Soundcore, referencing on headphones to Harman Curve, using, Auto EQ website.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I've now got profiles in Logic and Pro Tools for my NDH30s and HD 490s. The trick, though, is to make sure you fucking turn that off before you press bounce.
Yep.
Did that the other day and uploaded it to a client. He's like, yeah, why is it 10 LUFS lower? I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. And then I was away for the weekend and couldn't fix it. That was annoying.
What is it about the mums in the ATCs with the mid-range? Is it that the mid-range is louder, more perceived, or is it just that it's more detailed? Because everybody talks about the ATCs and they're like, the mid-range is the one. And then obviously Marc is like a huge ATC fanboy. I love the video he made. It's one of the best fucking audio comedy videos I've ever watched.
Yeah, the ATC 45 review.
Yeah, so I'm just like, see when you hear that mid-range, compare that to, say, the PSIs, compare that to the Amphions. What is it about the mid-range and the mums and the ATCs that kind of makes that kind of stand out to many people? Because I've spoken to some people about ATCs and they're like, it's a little bit too mid-forward. I mean, it's not NS10 mid-forward, but it is, it would maybe impact your mixing decisions, but then people say it's like the holy grail.
I mean, the ATCs I've heard, which are the SCM 25s and 45s, it's almost like you've got a band pass on them. The top end's not bad, but it's not PSI top end on them. And the low end isn't bad, but it's not PSI or PMC low end. And this is not including subwoofers. Even I've heard the ATCs with a subwoofer, and it just sounds dry and woolly sounding. But there's a juiciness in the mid-range. There's just an ATC thing. It's got that reputation. It's just the character that they deliver. And the Mum 8s are very indicative of that as well. And only they've tried to improve the top end and the low end as well, which I think they have. And also, it's a driver size thing. The ATC mid driver is bigger than the PSI mid driver, so it makes sense that it extends better down into the low mids. Also, it's a matter of crossovers. I can't remember where the ATC is, but I know the PSI crossover is about 600 hertz.
So, see when you say juicy, I'm trying to get what it is. Obviously, I've never heard it. See, I always assumed that they meant more detailed in the mid-range. But when you say juicy...
It's both. The ATCs are notorious, are popular for the detail, but other speakers have since caught up. So they're not actually as impressive as they used to be.
Right, okay.
A bit like a Mackie 450 for live sound, in the 90s, they blew everyone away. A little portable speaker that sounded like that with an amp built in was unheard of. It was amazing. Yeah. I mean, now, in comparison, they're woefully bad.
So how does that compare to, say, Genelecs then? Because obviously Genelecs were like 90s, they were like the monitors. Like, how did Genelecs compare to, like, let's say ATCs? Why were Genelecs so popular?
Probably because, I don't really know. I mean, Genelecs are great. They do something. It's just like all speaker brands. They do something and you either gravitate towards that or you don't. Or you hate it. It's just the modern stuff like the keys that I'm hoping to hear properly at Gearfest. This be today when this episode comes out, and none of you will be listening because you'll all be at Gearfest. But if you're hearing this and it's Gearfest is gone, cool. Hope we met you. But if not, you missed a treat. So I'm hoping to hear the keys at that and the Ex Machinas, and arguably the mums as well, where DSP has been embraced so much to really optimize speakers. Whereas the ATCs are one of the few fully analog speakers out there.
Which is interesting because I remember in your video, the reason that you said you liked the PSIs were because they were fully analog and you weren't a big fan of DSP. So it's interesting to hear you talk about DSP, but is it just that the Ex Machinas for you are one of the only speaker brands that do it right to what you've experienced?
Well, from what I've heard about keys, it seems to me that the keys and the Ex Machinas are leading the way in terms of level awareness. So moving something a decibel on the Ex Machinas was massive. It was really obvious. Whereas I slightly struggle with the PSIs in terms of level changes. I need to come in the next day and just check everything with fresh ears. But I've not mixed extensively on the Ex Machinas, so I don't have that compared to. But everyone says with the keys you can change 0.2 of a dB and it's obvious. So that will be interesting. But I won't be able to hear that at Gearfest because I'll just be playing pre-recorded music and not going to take a laptop and try mixes, for example.
So next week, obviously, we're probably going to do a video about Gearfest and we're going to talk about the experience. So it'll be good for me. Like again, NAMM was great. It'll be great to have the full weekend. There's an event party on the Friday night. You've got Gearfest all day. Then we're going to visit the present day production guys on the Sunday, so we can hear their Atmos room and hear the mums as well. So yeah, next week we'll probably just do a bit of a run through and kind of talk about certain things. And yeah, well, don't worry, we'll make it interesting. But yeah, if you are at Gearfest and you do watch the podcast, as Ed said. And well, saying that though, Ed, you do get a lot of people that watch us at 8 o'clock in the morning when we release it. So it'll be funny if some people that are going have got up early for Gearfest, watched us, and then they're going to meet us in the afternoon and be like, "Paul, Ed." So yeah, if you watch this and you see us at Gearfest, don't be shy. Obviously, I'm autistic, so you'll be lucky if you get a hug or even a handshake from me. You'll get a nod and you'll get a bit of banter. I'll warm up to you. With Ed, give him all the hugs that you want. That man, he loves a hug. Honestly, go up to him first. That's my advice. Go up to Ed first, and then I'll just creep in and be like, "All right, how you doing?" So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And on that bombshell, we'll leave it at that. Leave your comments down below of what you thought of the mix. Again, don't be dicks, fuck's sake. Again, this is a journey. This is what it's all about. We're have the bollocks, to share our own mixes. Not many people do. So hopefully you learn something from our experiences. And we'll continue to do more multi-tracks, hopefully as good as the Mark Daniel Nelson ones, because it does make a big difference. So yeah, that's me for this weekend. Have you got anything else to say, or are you happy to finish up?
Just quickly, thank you, Produce Like a Pro, for providing the multi-tracks. You can sign up to Produce Like a Pro and access those. Thank you to Baby Audio for sponsoring these last few episodes of the podcast. And as always, to DistroKid for all your digital distribution needs. It's been emotional. Hopefully see you at Gearfest. We'll have a full in-depth analysis and review of that next week when the hangovers have cured. On that bombshell, see you soon.